Hey everybody, got an idea, got some inspiration recently for this video on foot care and foot hygiene because I just came back from a trip and I had to um, do a little bit of like kind of extra care on my feet because unfortunately I got a bit of athlete's foot because it was very damp. It was like 2.5 days of rain on this 5-day trip. It was quite a lot of rain, and also going through some boggy, marshy places in addition to that. So my feet were pretty much wet for the majority of the trip. And so I got a bit of annoying, athlete's foot. And if you, don't know, I mean, most backpackers kind of get one, problem or another with their feet. If it's not aches and pains, and it's, fungus like athlete's foot or toenail fungus or um, then there's blisters, and there are many different things, of course, that can happen to your feet if you're a backpacker. And so I just wanted to, this is actually a video I wanted to make for some time, but I never got around to it. I'd forget about it. But on this particular trip, I guess I have, some foot fungus to thank for kind of giving me the opportunity to go, oh, well, and also 2020 and being stuck inside more. But yeah, so I want to talk about a few different kind of common things, and I should also get a disclaimer out of the way. Obviously, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a podiatrist, I'm not an expert. I'm just, a backpacker, a section hiker, to be more specific. For quite some time, I'm approaching 25 years of outdoors life, backpacking, wilderness backpacking, and long distance hiking. You're going to eventually, if you do it long enough, run into some issues, be it blisters or you know problems or whatever. And so I'm going to go through some of my routines, and hopefully that will help people, and also just to raise awareness. Not like this is like a big deal. I mean, I suppose it could be a big deal if you don't really take care of your feet. That could end a through hike if you're on a long hike and you don't take care of your feet, and things get infected. If there's blister and it goes back, it gets infected. I mean, sure, but that aside, this is as long as you take care of your feet, this is a minor issue. It's a yeah. So there's some precautions to take. Where to begin? I think what I'll do is I have some things in front of me that I wanted to talk about that are related to some of the common things that happen. So I'll start with what I talked about before, which was athlete's foot or fungus, right? And if you are getting warm, even if it's cooler out, but you're working up a sweat because you're hiking, because it's an intense activity, and your feet are getting wet, not only from the inside but the outside. So say rain, but even if you're hiking in the desert or a drier area, you're going to be sweating, and then that sweat's going to get into your your shoes and your socks. And so yeah, so let's start there with yeah, fungus. Not fun or nice to talk about, kind of gross, I know, but it's a reality. And I actually knew that there was going to be rain on this trip that I took recently, this section hike. And so I even did a preemptive strike on my feet to, ensure that they were in good health, going into this hike. And I'm glad that I did, because it ended up, this these preemptive measures actually, in the end, made things much easier to deal with. And what I'm talking about is a foot soak. And there are different kinds of foot soaks or foot baths that you can take. And there are two different kinds too. I'm talking foot baths at home, but you can also take foot baths on trail. I'll get to that more when we talk about blisters, and I have the blister tape here to remind me. So because I also encourage, that's something that I try to do a lot when I'm out hiking, but more on that later. Foot baths like in, say, a river or a spring, we'll get to that. But so there are many different kinds of at-home foot baths, right? You can use all manner of different, it could be just warm water and salt, or you can get, for instance, a bath, a salt, a foot bath that's specifically made for your feet. I have one here that I got at the supermarket, and it works well. It's just, salt, and of course they add, a nice smell to it, right? And some of them are even medicated to help with, fungus, right? But I actually didn't use this before I left. I did that when I came back home. What I did before I left is actually just black tea. I took a couple of black tea bags and I made a very, very strong pot of tea. I put it into a small tub, right? Obviously, I let it cool down and all that. And then I soaked my feet in just black tea. I have done this on occasion. It's not something I do regularly because I find it's not as effective treatment for my feet. It feels nice, it gets kind of tingly in your feet, the tannins from the black tea. It is, black tea is technically antiseptic. It kills, fungus and germs and whatnot. But I mean, it's not magic. It's not like super medicated, right? It's a more mild way, and which is why I did this as like kind of first strike as a preemptive measure, right? So I did that with like the day before I went on my hike, and then I'm go on the hike, and of course as it's summertime, and while this has been a cooler summer, eventually I'm hiking many kilometers, and I notice of course my toes are getting a little itchy, and there's toe jam and yucky feet, right, from having swamp feet. You literally hike through a small swamp and it's in the rain and all that, this happens. So now let's go to on trail then to what to do then. I always have two pair of hiking socks and one pair I try to keep dry, which I've written about on Reddit before and talked about before, kind of like having good sock routines. So one pair of socks is dirty, one is on my feet, and then what I will do is that when I take a break, say for lunch or at camp, when I make camp, I will wash them. I'll just I was lucky in that because it was raining, there are these little pools of water in the forest that I could use to wash my socks, and of course using biodegradable soap and not at a water source that people are using for drinking or swimming or anything like that. So of course, use common sense and leave no trace when you're doing laundry on trail. But I tend to, that's mostly what I'm doing when I'm doing laundry on trail is my socks. And I have actually, I've been pretty good about it because I've noticed just over the years that having clean, socks obviously is going to contribute to just better foot health and a better hike overall. And then, keeping one pair dry, that is more of a challenge, especially if you live in a rainy place like I do here in Scandinavia. So what I do is to dry them, I'll put the clean pair, once I've cleaned them, I'll put them in my pockets of my hiking pants, or I'll hang, if it's sunny, which it was not that sunny at first, at least the last few days it was a bit sunny, you can hang it on your pack on the top strap or on the side straps, and then there you go. You got clean, dry socks that you can put on whenever you need to switch out your socks. Yeah. Now, in addition to when I came home, so okay, let's fast forward. I take the hike. I notice I'm having a bit itchy toes. Right. I come home and I do the supermarket bought foot salt bath. But because I wanted to take, because by that time it started to spread and get a little worse. After 5-6 days. So I took the next step, which is tea tree oil. And this little teeny bottle, I'm not sponsored or anything, I got this just years ago. I got this at a Whole Foods when I was visiting the US, actually years and years ago. And you notice this is how many? 30 milliliters, this tiny little bottle here. This has lasted me over 5 years, more. I've had it for quite some time now, and I still have some because it's quite potent. And if I were to do a through hike, what I would do is I have empty little dropper bottle like this, for example. You could fill this with tea tree oil, and then when you're in town taking a 0 day, or if you're, really need to medicate your feet, then you can use tea tree oil either in a foot bath. What I do is I put between 5 to 10 drops in the foot bath. Again, no letters or no emails if you have, if you try this and it doesn't work for you. Again, I'm not a doctor. This works for me. I don't know if it'll work for you. Some people could be allergic. I know I've read online that tea tree oil, some people with more sensitive skin or allergies, so do your homework, all right? But what I found for me is that this is great. After a couple foot baths, that knocked out the athlete's foot. So now my feet are back, and healthy again, right? Yeah, so having a little thing of tea tree oil, it's not that expensive. A little bit goes a long way. And if you're a thru hiker, this is something you could consider. Um, and what I can do is I can put a link to online buddy of mine, Mr. Pie on the Trail. He has a whole video on what he does to avoid blisters, and this is a nice segue into the next topic, which is blisters. What he does to have good foot health is he actually rubs his feet with petroleum jelly or Vaseline to prevent blisters. And how that's connected to what I'm talking about with tea tree too is I don't like to mix the tea tree oil with a carrier oil. What some people like to do is take like a few drops of tea tree oil in a neutral oil, a carrier oil, like say coconut oil or whatever oil you want to use that's like, good for your skin, right? Almond oil, etc. So I have tried this in the past. In fact, what I did is I mixed some tea tree oil with some almond oil that I had, and I rubbed it on my feet. And I don't like the feeling, and then putting socks back on, it's not for me. The feeling of it is not for me. And I find that the foot bath is more pleasant, but also kind of it's able to be more effective. I noticed that I put the carrier oil on more than I did than taking the foot bath. Perhaps too because I'm also combining the tea tree with salt, Epsom salt, or I don't know if it's Epsom salt or what kind of salt, but you know what I mean. This stuff here, right? But yeah. But now, blisters, right? In preventing blisters, you can do like others do, like Paul, Mr. Pie on the Trail. He rubs his feet with Vaseline. I don't do that. What I do is I just make sure to have good routines. Like I said, have my socks, try and have, my socks be clean and dry as much as possible, but make no mistake, don't get me wrong. The more you hike, and especially in wet, temperate areas, your feet are gonna be wet and wet. Often it's something you just deal with, right? But okay, you see here, this is actually my wife's pencil that she takes with her when we go backpacking, and I've pulled a little bit of Leukotape here. I don't know how well you can see here. Leukotape. Yeah, this stuff is great. When it comes to blisters, what I do is just, my biggest advice is just don't be stubborn. Take the time when you have a hot spot, when you start to feel like, I got a little burn hot spot on my foot. Take a water break, grab some Leukotape, or you can, whatever tape of your choice. Some people like to use the white medical tape. Some people like to use, some people even use duct tape. I wouldn't recommend that. I've used that in the past, no good. Leukotape I prefer, but then there are blister pads like that I've used too that are all right. Like they're kind of like Band-Aids, but they're meant for blisters, right? Just stop and take care of it before it develops any further. Since, I guess, growing up, because in my youth I would just ignore it, and I got worse blisters when I was much younger. But through the years, what I've done when it comes to blisters is simply stop, take a break, and now we can talk about also footbaths on the trail. I'm lucky, I guess, in that where I hike, there's lots of water. There are many streams and springs and lakes and rivers and even, water pools after it rains, if you want. But just, you're going to be, filling up your water anyway. So what I will do after hiking for my feet are sore and tired. So not only does it help with, feet being sore and tired, but also helps to cool down those hot spots, to, promote good, foot health by, bringing down the inflammation and the hot spot, right? So yeah, on my hikes, I often will, I will fill up my water. I'll, take off my shoes, take off my gaiters, and just have a good soak out there, and then give it a wash. And if you are at a place with a bank, like say a riverbank or a lake shore or whatever, right, and there's sand, great. Take a little bit of sand, give yourself a little scrub, right? That gets rid of the dead skin and the nastiness, and hopefully you get some of that fungi out of there too. It doesn't take that long. So that's something, you can look into, is using natural materials to help with your, foot baths out on the trail. But yeah, Leukotape is my solution with blisters. I got one very, very small blister on this 5-day hike. It was a pretty intense hike. The terrain is very hilly. I was going up and down quite a lot. plus my feet are soaked. So this is like perfect recipe for blisters. And I only got one very small blister. And all I did was I noticed I got the hot spot. So I stopped, I soaked my feet at a river. After I filled up my water balls, I put a piece of tape on here. And then when I made camp, in the morning next day, I replaced it with another little piece. And it's pretty sticky. The first piece, because my shoes were so wet and it was so soggy, that did come off. But the second piece, after I dried off a bit more, that stayed on all day the next day without issue, and I was fine. So yeah, that's foot hygiene. I know it could be a bit uncomfortable to talk about when it comes to these kind of gross things like athlete's foot and toe jam and fungus and all that, but here are some of my routines. Here are some of the things that you can consider. Take care of your feet. Obviously, there are things you want to consider that are related to this, like make sure your shoes fit properly, your shoes are properly broken in, make sure that you're you got the right shoe size, make sure you're trimming your toenails, etc., and so all that. But yeah, all those things you should also take into account because as you can see, it can be a bit complicated with all these different factors when you factor it in. But okay, I'll shut up now. I don't want to talk too long. We've now gone over 15 minutes of me yapping about feet, right? Yeah. So happy trails to you. Take care of yourselves and your feet. And yeah, goodbye.